I came home to Riverton after 3 silent years, believing I would only stay for a week. My mother smiled, but her eyes carried storms she tried to hide. Frank opened the door with a grin that felt too sharp to trust. The house was dim, like it had forgotten how to breathe. Dinner was quiet until the sound of a slap shattered the room. My mother didn't scream. She just froze, as if pain had become routine. Frank warned me with a stare that lingered too long. I realized I had stepped into a place ruled by fear. The week I promised to stay suddenly felt like a trap closing around us. The mornings in that house always felt rehearsed. My mother woke before the sun, moving quietly like she feared sound itself. Frank kept a schedule taped to the fridge, written in thick red marker. It listed chores, meal times, and rules disguised as reminders. My mother followed it with the obedience of someone long defeated. I watched her measure coffee with trembling hands. Frank liked it exactly right, and she knew the cost of mistakes. He entered the kitchen each morning, like a judge arriving for sentencing. His eyes scanned the room to confirm nothing had shifted without him. My presence annoyed him, though he tried to hide it behind fake politeness. He commented on my clothes, my tone, even how I stood near the counter. Control was woven into every gesture he made. If he asked a question, the answer had to be immediate. If my mother hesitated, he tightened his jaw until she apologized. The house itself reflected his dominance. Curtains remained shut, as if daylight required his permission. Walls carried dents that no one explained. A picture frame hung crooked for days because my mother feared touching his things. I noticed how she flinched when he walked behind her. When he cleared his throat, she straightened her posture instantly. Each evening, tension settled like dust on every surface. Frank expected dinner at 6, silence at 7, and TV at 8. My mother moved around him like she was navigating a minefield. If his beer was too warm, she panicked. If the remote was misplaced, she scrambled to fix it before he noticed. I tried to ask her what was happening, but she insisted everything was fine. Her voice shook with every denial, betraying the truth she feared to say. I found bruises she claimed were accidents from gardening. But her garden was dead, abandoned months ago. Frank monitored her phone and checked her mileage after each errand. She told me she wasn't allowed to leave town without him. She said it like a rule she had memorized rather than questioned. On the third night, I heard them whispering in the hallway. Frank accused her of hiding money, though she had none to hide. His voice was low, but sharp enough to cut through the closed door. My mother apologized until her words dissolved into sobs. I stepped out, but she begged me with her eyes to return to my room. Fear lived in every corner of that house. It clung to her clothes, her silence, her nervous smiles. Frank treated her as if she were something he owned rather than loved. I watched him study her reactions the way predators watch prey. He enjoyed her fear, fed on it, needed it. The more I observed, the clearer it became that she had been living like this for years. Long before I returned. Long before I realized how deep his control ran. Each day tightened the knot in my stomach. The truth was no longer hiding. It was right in front of me, undeniable and suffocating. My mother was not living a life. She was surviving it. I started searching for answers in the quiet moments when Frank wasn't home. The house felt different when he was gone, like it finally exhaled. I checked the office door first, the one he always kept locked. The doorknob was scratched, as if someone had tried to force it before. My mother insisted it was just for important papers, but she never looked inside. I walked through the hallway and noticed his briefcase sitting near the stairs. It was heavy, filled with receipts that made no sense. There were payments labeled with initials, dates, and vague descriptions. Some amounts were small, others were terrifyingly large. My mother had no idea where the money came from or where it went. Frank always said he worked construction, yet he never came home dirty. He rarely mentioned coworkers and never took calls in front of us. I watched him whisper on the phone late at night behind the garage. His conversations were tense, rushed, never friendly. I began writing down every pattern I observed. I kept my notebook hidden under my mattress. One morning, I followed him from a distance after he left for work. He didn't drive toward the job site he once mentioned. He parked near an old warehouse and disappeared inside for 2 hours. He emerged with a different bag than the one he carried in. That was the moment I realized his entire life was built on lies. I needed more information, so I searched his name online. Articles appeared about unpaid debts, lawsuits, and missing funds. But the most unsettling discovery was a forum post linking him to a past case. A woman had accused him of assault years ago in another state. Her name was Linda Garrow. I found her number through a public directory and called her. She answered with hesitation, as if expecting bad news. When I told her who I was, she grew silent for several seconds. Then she said she had been waiting for this call for years. We met at a small cafe a few towns away, far from anyone who might see. Linda looked fragile, but strong in the way survivors often are. She told me Frank once controlled every part of her life. She said he isolated her from family and emptied her savings. When she tried to leave, he threatened to ruin her life. She described the same anger, the same chilling silence, the same fear. She warned me that Frank didn't just lie. He reinvented himself constantly. He moved from place to place, leaving destruction behind. She believed he owed money to dangerous people. She said he once hinted at something unfixable he had done years before. Her final words stayed with me long after we parted. "Protect your mother. He won't let go willingly." I drove home with my heart pounding, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Every detail Linda shared matched what I had witnessed. My mother wasn't his first victim. She might not be his last if I didn't act. The fear in our home no longer felt vague or shapeless. It had a history. It had a pattern. And now it had a name. I contacted Scott at the bank to review my mother's accounts. He looked concerned when I explained the situation. We pulled every transaction from the past year. Each line told a story of stealth and deception. Over $30,000 had disappeared, with no explanation. The withdrawals were small at first, almost unnoticeable. Then they grew larger, more frequent, as if testing the limits. I compared them to my mother's statements and found glaring gaps. Frank had been siphoning her money without her knowledge. I traced some payments to online gambling sites. Others went to shell companies I couldn't immediately identify. The pattern was deliberate, methodical, and cruel. I felt my stomach tighten as the truth sank in. Frank wasn't just controlling her life, he was taking it apart piece by piece. I began searching the house for any physical evidence of his plans. In the study, I found a locked drawer under his desk. I picked the lock with shaking hands. Inside were papers that made my blood run cold. Contracts for the house were signed in blank spaces. He had prepared documents to force my mother to give up everything. I discovered notarized forms and signatures that weren't hers. Frank had anticipated every excuse, every hesitation. I realized he had studied her weaknesses meticulously. My mother had no idea what was coming. The documents were damning, proof of his intent to seize her property. I brought the papers to Scott, who confirmed they were valid but forged. He explained how easy it would be for Frank to manipulate her into signing. The urgency of the situation hit me hard. I couldn't just watch. I had to act before he succeeded. I documented everything carefully, photographing each page and transaction. The evidence was clear, undeniable, and frightening. Frank's plan wasn't spontaneous. It had been developing over months, maybe years. I felt a surge of anger at his audacity and cruelty. Every dollar he stole, every contract he forged, was a violation of trust. My mother had worked her whole life for that house. It was her sanctuary, her legacy, and he wanted to destroy it. I realized he was not just dangerous emotionally, but financially lethal. His manipulation extended beyond fear. It attacked security itself. I thought about my next move carefully, knowing he would notice any misstep. The evidence also revealed his network of lies and connections. He had debts he couldn't pay, threats he couldn't escape. I saw the threads connecting his gambling, fraud, and the threats from creditors. Each document deepened the picture of a man who calculated destruction. I knew confronting him directly would be risky. He would escalate, and my mother could be hurt. We needed a strategy, a plan that considered every worst-case scenario. For the first time, the reality of the danger became tangible. Frank's control wasn't just in words or fear. It was legal, financial, and meticulously prepared. I left the office with copies of every transaction. The weight of the knowledge pressed on me like a physical burden. I couldn't trust anyone but myself to protect my mother. The battle wasn't just about fear anymore. It was about survival. And I knew the clock was ticking. We planned our escape in whispers, careful to avoid Frank's notice. The night he went bowling seemed perfect for our move. My mother packed essentials in silence, glancing over her shoulder constantly. I memorized every creak in the floorboards to avoid making noise. We agreed on signals, small gestures that meant now or wait. Frank had begun sensing something, his mood sharper, eyes more watchful. He questioned every delay, every misplaced item in the house. I noticed him, lingering near the hallway late at night. His shadow fell over the doorway as he tested the knob of my room. Fear rose in my chest, but I stayed calm outwardly. We waited for him to leave, counting minutes like seconds in a countdown. My mother's hands shook as she adjusted her coat, ready for the night. I whispered instructions, careful to keep my voice low. Frank's unpredictability made every step dangerous. We planned to slip out the back door while he was distracted. I checked windows and locks, ensuring nothing could betray us. Every sound from the street made us tense, listening for his return. The night stretched long, each minute heavier than the last. I reminded my mother to breathe, though my own chest felt tight. We crept through rooms, careful not to knock anything over. The suitcase felt heavier than it should, weighted with fear and essentials. I glanced back at the study, imagining Frank discovering our absence. The thought made my hands tighten on the bag. Then came the moment when I thought he had left. The hallway was empty, the house silent except for our cautious steps. We approached the back door, eyes darting to shadows. I touched the handle, ready to push it open. Suddenly, a voice stopped me cold, calm but dangerous. "Where do you think you're going?" Frank stood in the corner. My heart jumped. We froze, knowing any wrong move could trigger violence. He stepped closer, eyes scanning our faces for guilt. I held my mother's hand tightly, signaling her to stay still. Frank had a stack of papers in his other hand, contracts he wanted signed. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. My mother's lips quivered, but she didn't speak. I realized reasoning was impossible. This confrontation was inevitable, and we needed a backup plan. I reached into my bag for the documents we had gathered, ready to use them. Frank advanced, unaware we had proof of his schemes. The papers could either protect us or enrage him further. I remembered Linda's warning. He would escalate when cornered. Every instinct screamed that we were seconds away from disaster. I adjusted my grip, preparing to act decisively. The room seemed to shrink, tension pressing from every wall. He held the contracts like weapons, ready to force compliance. My mother's eyes met mine, silent plea for courage. I nodded subtly, signaling the moment had arrived. Frank lunged, thinking surprise was on his side. We were ready, moving according to the plan we rehearsed for weeks. The night that began as a chance to escape had turned into a test of nerves, courage, and survival. Every heartbeat echoed in the room, counting down to the confrontation we could no longer avoid. We had prepared, but the outcome depended on split-second decisions. The house that had held fear for years was about to witness our defiance. And in that charged silence, we stepped forward, ready to reclaim our freedom. Frank's calm mask cracked the moment he realized we had proof. He screamed, throwing papers across the room like weapons. The contracts scattered, some landing at my mother's feet. He lunged toward them, desperate to regain control. I pulled my mother back, keeping her safe behind me. Frank's rage escalated, louder and more dangerous than ever. We heard sirens in the distance, but he didn't notice. His focus was singular, possession and power. The air felt thick, charged with fear and fury. Then flames appeared near the back of the house. Smoke curled along the ceiling, creeping into every corner. Frank froze, his eyes wide as the fire grew. I grabbed my mother's hand, dragging her toward the door. He cursed, banging on furniture, trying to find a way out. The fire spread quickly, fueled by old furniture and papers. It painted the walls orange and red, casting shadows of panic. Frank realized the danger too late. He ran toward the garage, hopping for escape. I stayed close to my mother, guiding her through the smoke. We could hear him shouting behind us, wild and uncontrolled. Outside, neighbors had gathered, watching the flames devour the house. Frank disappeared into the night, running from both fire and justice. We called the police and explained everything we knew. FBI agents arrived soon after, questioning neighbors and witnesses. I handed them copies of the contracts, bank statements, and notes. They nodded, impressed with the thorough documentation. The investigators revealed Frank had been under scrutiny for years. Debt collectors, criminal associates, and previous victims were all involved. A body was found days later near a distant highway. DNA tests proved it was not Frank, leaving his fate uncertain. Rumors spread about his involvement in older violent crimes. We learned he was running from both law enforcement and dangerous debtors. The chaos he left behind was staggering, a tangled web of lies. Neighbors whispered about his temper and mysterious disappearances. I realized the fire may have been accidental, but it saved us from immediate danger. Frank's obsession with control blinded him to real threats. He had underestimated the evidence and our readiness. The house, once a symbol of fear, was now reduced to ashes. I felt relief mixed with lingering terror as the smoke cleared. My mother hugged me tightly, whispering gratitude through tears. Authorities continued searching, alert for any trace of Frank. The fire revealed hidden documents that further confirmed his crimes. Neighbors came forward with stories of his past manipulations. Financial investigators traced missing money to offshore accounts. It became clear Frank had built his life on deception and exploitation. We stayed in temporary housing, recovering from the trauma. Each day brought updates about Frank's last known whereabouts. Despite his absence, the danger felt real and present. The fire had ended one chapter, but the investigation continued. We realized Frank's world was collapsing from every angle. The web of debts, threats, and lies left him vulnerable. Our victory was bittersweet, marked by loss and lingering fear. Yet for the first time, we felt the possibility of safety. The nightmare that had dominated our lives for years was finally unraveling. Frank was captured weeks later at a truck stop in another state. He had been moving constantly, avoiding law enforcement and creditors alike. The moment he was taken into custody, his arrogance vanished. Inside the holding cell, his composure cracked under pressure. Tensions with other inmates escalated quickly. Frank got into a violent fight over debts owed to gang members. The altercation left him dead before the trial could begin. Relief washed over me, but it was tempered by unease. We still had to deal with the aftermath of his schemes. The police obtained a key to his safe deposit box from his belongings. When we opened it, the contents stunned us both. Stacks of cash were neatly bundled, totaling nearly $60,000. A detailed ledger listed every debt he owed and to whom. Bitcoin wallets were stored on a USB, containing $57,000 in digital currency. There were folders with video files showing surveillance of multiple people. He had recorded everything, likely intending to use it for blackmail. Every document reflected planning, manipulation, and control. We realized the extent of his obsession with power over others. The evidence painted a chilling picture of his schemes and threats. My mother, Eleanor, stared at the materials silently. She shook her head and said she wanted none of it. Her desire was not for revenge or wealth. She simply wanted freedom and peace after years of fear. I agreed, and we carefully documented everything for authorities. The ledger and USB were handed over to investigators for further action. We could have taken the money, but it would not heal the wounds. Instead, it became proof, a shield against anyone who might follow his pattern. The physical cash, accounts, and videos were cold reminders of his manipulation. Yet letting go gave us control over our own lives for the first time. We left the bank with a sense of closure, but also a responsibility. The truth about Frank's actions could now prevent harm to others. We returned home, carrying only the memories, not his wealth or legacy. My mother began rebuilding her life in small, deliberate steps. She sought therapy, reconnected with friends, and started volunteering. I focused on my investigative work, channeling my skills into positive impact. The discovery of Frank's materials highlighted how far his deceit reached. It revealed networks, debts, and secrets that authorities could pursue. We felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion after years of tension. No amount of money could replace the lost time and stolen security. We realized survival had been victory enough. The closure allowed us to breathe without fear for the first time. Frank's death ended his immediate threat, but not the need for vigilance. Every document he left behind became evidence for justice. We understood the power of knowledge and preparation in escaping abuse. Holding nothing for ourselves freed us from the chains he left behind. It was the final step in reclaiming autonomy and dignity. We walked away from his legacy determined to live on our terms. For the first time in years, the future felt open and ours to shape. Frank's schemes were over, but our lives were beginning anew. We carried the lessons forward, stronger and unbroken. We moved to Chicago to start fresh, leaving the past behind. The city felt alive, full of possibilities and distance from fear. My mother found strength she had long buried under years of control. She began volunteering at a shelter for women escaping abuse. Helping others became her way of reclaiming purpose. I returned to investigative work, focusing on financial crimes and fraud. Our experience gave me insight no textbook could provide. Slowly, we rebuilt routines, small joys, and trust in the world. The trauma lingered, but it no longer defined us. 1 year later, we opened Eleanor Safe Homes for women in danger. The project offered refuge, resources, and a path to independence. Every life saved reminded us why survival mattered. We transformed pain into action, grief into hope. Our story inspired others to speak, escape, and reclaim their freedom. Freedom was no longer just a dream. It was tangible and reachable. The nightmare of Frank's control became a catalyst for change. We celebrated small victories and watched women regain confidence. The legacy of fear was replaced by courage and resilience. We finally understood that survival was not enough. Thriving was possible. Our past shaped us but did not imprison us. The future was ours to define, free from manipulation and violence. We had escaped, survived, and now we were building a new life. Our journey proved that hope, courage, and action could overcome darkness.